As you can tell, we had a little technical difficulty. I don't know if we still do or not. Anyway, you got to love technical difficulty. Oh, my gosh. You have no idea. I know there's people out there that don't understand this. You have no idea how you talk about something getting you off your game. Man, I want to tell you, be all ready to go and have some technical difficulty. So I apologize, as I will likely ramble through this first segment, try to get my act together here. Anyway, I apologize to all of you listening. It was just one of those things. As you know, we had some difficulty yesterday, and I guess there was still some hangover from yesterday, for lack of better. Anyway, economic news. First of all, the futures, the Dow futures, they were up pretty significantly until some data came out, and then they dropped down. Of course, yesterday, the Dow fell more than 58 points. That, by the way, was a 3-month low for the Dow. So that was yesterday. The Dow was down about 58.90 points yesterday. I suspect, well, I'm not going to suspect anything. I did suspect yesterday they'd be down. I was right. We'll see what happens today. But right now, they're scheduled to open negative territory. Well, no, not really. Not negative territory. They're just scheduled to open lower than they were just a little bit ago. About an hour ago, they were up. Futures were up about 40 points. Then the economic news came out in reference to producer prices, retail numbers. They were a little lower than expected, and then we saw the futures drop. This morning, the U.S. producer prices dropped 0.2% in October, so that is good news. Year over year, producer prices have risen to 2.3%. 2.3%. Now, this is producer prices, wholesale prices. It doesn't necessarily mean that those prices are going to be passed along to you and I. It is likely they will be, but it doesn't necessarily mean that. Tomorrow, consumer prices come out, and we will see exactly where we are there and what gets passed along to us. Retail sales declined for the month of October, 0.3%. Not a big deal. The good news is that retail sales are up 3.8% year over year, and that is obviously the good news there. So we saw sales rose in gasoline. So gas stations' retail sale numbers were up 1.4%. We've got grocery stores up 0.8%. So anyway, that's what we've seen in those numbers coming out. It was not perceived necessarily as good numbers, and that's why futures tailed off a little bit this morning. It was looking a bit sluggish and was lower than anticipated. So that was the economic data coming out. Of course, the big number, or the economic data that we'll be looking for, is tomorrow, when we're looking for a number of other things. Gasoline prices are falling, continually falling in the weeks after the storm, which is not necessarily unusual. So a storm has an impact oftentimes on gasoline prices, and it can have an impact where they're coming down, and it's usually coming down because we see a dramatic change in demand. So when we have a storm that is in the Northeast Corridor, like this one was, where you have an enormous amount of population and an enormous amount of people depending upon fuel that have all of a sudden stopped, that would help, certainly in that case, in that demand's going to go lower, prices are going to go lower. But the fact of the matter is, we've got a national average of gasoline prices at $3.45. That is a 4-month low and is down 4 cents from last week. So that's where we are with gas prices. And listen, that's good news. We're headed into the busiest travel time of the year. over the Thanksgiving weekend. So there's a lot more people, about 4.5% more people that are going to be driving this Thanksgiving than last Thanksgiving, primarily due to the lower prices. So I guess that's good news. A board of top U.S. regulators approved several recommendations to overhaul or for the overhauling of the $2.6 trillion money market fund industry. Now, I've been following this story now for about 6 months, and I've been talking about it. You know, or longer than 6 months. It's probably been almost a year now talking about this. The original rules and regulations came out of the International Monetary Program, and internationally, there was this need to change, or I guess regulate, the money market industry, which I agreed with, by the way. Now, I don't like the fact that we're taking our cues from international from the international world. I don't like that. I wish there were something we were doing here in the United States. But nevertheless, in my opinion, this problem, got to get fixed. The problem being is that these money market accounts, $2.7 trillion. Think about this for a minute, folks. $2.7 trillion sitting in money market accounts. It's an enormous amount of money. I mean, that could solve our economic problem overnight. So it's an enormous amount of money. So what we're seeing is there's a call for that to be regulated. The regulation that they're calling for is primarily to get on the stick about the fact that regulators need to take a look at these money market accounts, because what we have is, remember, we've got an enormous amount of that $2.7 trillion into mutual fund money market accounts that aren't FDIC insured, and they're taking risk on that money. It's a beautiful thing for a mutual fund company because they can take your money, cash money, they can invest it in some other maybe very risky kinds of bonds and things and generate a much higher revenue for their company in this money market account, while all along you're only expecting about, 25 basis points or 0.25% return. So if they can get a return of 4 or 5%, obviously it's a good business. But there's also risk involved in that, and that is the problem. And many of these mutual fund companies over the last 3 or 4 years have had to actually go in and bail out their own money market accounts, where they've had to write checks to put in their money market accounts to make up for some risk that they've taken. And it's almost becoming, and this is just my opinion, it's almost been becoming just kind of a standard practice. You take these bets, they don't work out. Some of them work. The ones that work, it's great. You get a little cash reserves. The ones that don't work, you've got to add some money into. I don't like people playing with money market money, because you're putting that money in a money market assuming that it is not going to earn anything, yes, but there is not going to be any risk involved. The only two money market accounts that I'm aware of, and this was public information, was published about 6 months ago, that have not money. Now, this is mutual fund money market accounts, not FDIC money market accounts, that have not had to bail themselves out, is Fidelities and Vanguards. So anyway, that is coming under a little bit more scrutiny today, as a matter of fact, as it looks like a board of top U.S. regulators now approves several of the recommendations on the overhauling of the $2.6 trillion, I think I said 2.7, it's $2.6 trillion money market fund in industry. Fears about the fiscal cliff. According to the Wall Street Journal, the fiscal cliff concerns and about Europeans' debt crisis, according to the business leaders at the Wall Street Journal conference. So fears of the European debt crisis apparently is eclipsing or becoming more in the forefront than is the United States fiscal cliff. That's what this article is saying. Apparently, business leaders are more concerned about what's going on in Europe than they are concerned about the U.S. fiscal cliff. Well, that's not true when it comes to those that are creating jobs. Those that are creating jobs, I've already talked about tens of thousands of layoffs. Tens of thousands of layoffs. You know some of those companies. I'll talk a little bit about that when we get back. Yesterday, I said, because we weren't able to go to the phones, I said yesterday we're going to go to the phones today, and we will stay on the phones. So we're going to do that today